Going to bring the January 16th Offshore Wind Advisory Committee to an opening. We'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, this is quite a turnout. Appreciate everyone showing up. For those of you who first time, I know we had a meeting last month, but the Offshore Wind Advisory Committee has been basically developed with the help of Shauna and the Select Board to essentially be the sounding board for any offshore wind projects that would be impacting Westport here in the future. So the goal of this committee is to gather information, gather data, gather public input from the residents as we move forward in this process. And this process is, let's say, very fluid and very variable, as I'm sure many of you know just by looking at news and current events. Before we get started on our agenda, since we have such a large crowd today, I'm just going to, again, just have everyone go through introductions again so you know who is on the committee in case any questions come up, and then we will just get started on our agenda. Christopher.
Yes, my name is Christopher Thrasher. I am on the committee as an at-large member.
Hi, I'm Shauna Tees. I'm a select board member.
Constance Ski, at-large member from Protect Our Westport Waters.
Jake McWigan, member of the Conservation Committee.
Rick Smith, Shellfish Advising. Maury May, Economic Development.
My name's John Bulley. I'm planning board member. I also chair the Climate Resilience Committee.
Thank you. Anyone that's standing in the back, I know we have a few seats in the front, maybe a couple mixed in if you want to sit down. You can't, don't sit next to John. So first off, what we want to go through is the last meeting we had the state come in. Some of you might have been here, some of you might have actually seen it, basically discussing their role in the process. And that role is through the permitting, the licensing. There has been a piece of legislation that recently passed and was signed by Governor Healy in November, which seeks to streamline that process and make it, I guess, less cumbersome for the offshore wind companies to move forward in the permitting process. So it allows, it also allows cities and towns to apply for grants in order to get expert or consultant work on the impacts of the projects on a particular town or municipality. So that is actually now in a 15th month window for regulations. They have a public comment period, and then that'll move forward. But I think more importantly for the crowd and obviously for the committee here is the discussions of offshore wind or Vineyard Offshore, which is a project that Constance will be giving a pretty detailed presentation on all the projects that are out that would be impacting Westport, and actually now you can see visually impacting Westport when you go down along the shoreline. But the Vineyard Wind, we have invited them to give a presentation to our committee. They've had some scheduling conflicts, but they are going to be coming in February. So my advice to you is once we set that date to obviously show up at that one, Vineyard Offshore will be here. And I have had a very good and open relationship and discussions with the individual from Vineyard Offshore with respect to if you're going to come in front of this committee and in front of the residents of Westport to give details and specifics as to how or if a project will be impacting Westport. I don't want them to come here and talk at high levels about all the projects that are going on offshore, but specifically, we want to know what will be impacting Westport if there is something that will impact Westport. So that's kind of my directive to them. Hopefully, they do that. Again, we've had pretty open discussions on this, and hopefully in February when they do show up, they will be willing to take questions, and hopefully that will be providing us a little bit more information. But as I mentioned, and I have a stack of papers here of newspaper articles and various other things that have been coming out recently. The Vineyard Wind update specifically, the project that lists Westport as a landing spot, it would be Vineyard Wind 2, had a bit of a setback with respect to the uptake of all their megawatts. This whole process is very complicated. There's a lot of financial markets, a lot of what I would consider derivatives with respect to the projects. So Vineyard Wind had 1,200 megawatt hours that 1,200 megawatts for this project that need to be uptaken by various states. They bid on the megawatts, and originally Massachusetts committed to 800 of that 1,200 megawatts of that project. On Friday, December 20th, right before Christmas, Connecticut was supposed to agree to take up the extra 400 megawatts to obviously complete that 1,200 megawatts for that project. Governor Lamont in Connecticut made a decision to not accept that 400 megawatts. So what does that really mean? You can look at the press clippings or the stories about Governor Lamont. He did push back on offshore wind, saying it was going to have a detrimental impact on utility bills in Connecticut, and didn't necessarily believe that they were in the right spot to take up those 400 megawatts. So what does that mean for that project? Essentially, that entire project has to go back out to bid, all 1,200 megawatts. They can't just go out and sell that 400 megawatts to, say, Rhode Island or back to Massachusetts. The entire 1,200 has to go back out to bid. And so essentially, as Constance will probably touch upon in her presentation, that buys them some time and buys the town some time. It could be a 6-month delay. And again, when Vineyard Offshore comes in next month, hopefully they can provide us more details as to the impact of that. So that is, I guess, a positive from a committee standpoint. It buys us more time to look at projects, impacts, and data, and really Westport specific. Now, I'm sure everyone's aware a new administration will be sworn in this upcoming Monday. He has taken a pretty vocal stance in his opposition to offshore wind. We have seen that discussions that executive orders will go into place in the first week or so, either putting a halt to to current projects or projects that are currently in the federal permitting process. So again, in my discussions with Vineyard Offshore, they don't know. We don't know, and as you know, even people in the administration probably aren't sure what direction President-elect Trump will go with respect to that. There is a Congressman, Jeff Van Drew from New Jersey, who has been working to craft an executive order and work with President Trump and essentially put in a 6-month moratorium on offshore wind to do an analysis on its impact on the environment, utility rates, tourism, fishing, everything along those lines. And even as early as today, the new the appointee for the Department of Interior, Governor Burgum from the Dakotas, essentially said if it's in the federal permitting process, they probably cannot slow it down. If projects have not received a federal permit, that will obviously cause some delays and maybe an analysis of those specific projects. So that's kind of why there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of variables with this project specifically to Westport. There's obviously national implications from an administration standpoint, as well as locally with obviously taking up the 1,200 megawatts. But that is specific to this project. I know we've had discussions in the past with approval of the Brayton Point one that will be going up there. That's outside of our purview, but again, that's kind of where we're at. Another important part to this is Governor Healy this evening has her State of the State, and she will obviously, I'm sure, be addressing offshore wind because the Commonwealth is very supportive of offshore wind and will probably look to do what they can do even outside of what the administration seeks to stop. So again, that's why I guess that's my 5-minute, 10-minute overview, but that's where we're at. We are tasked as a committee to look at specifically what would be impacting Westport. Again, it provides us a good opportunity to hear from the public, to bring people in like the state and bring in Vineyard Offshore next month. And again, everyone that's here, I know it's a crowded room, but I'd stress and really implore you to probably show up in next month when we set that date so that we can get specifics as to how it's, if that project would come to Westport, or if it's going to go to New London. There's a lot of stuff going on with respect to that. So that was a high-level overview. I don't want to take too much time away from our presentation. Constance Ski, who obviously...
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
before we get to that, I wonder, I think you gave an excellent summary of the state presentation last month. But one of the things that you and I asked them is, and we'll, I'm sure, get this from Constance's presentation, is that these are complex projects. And one of the advantages of this group is that we are one of the first, if not the first, to have an advisory body to a town. And there's an advantage to being one of the first advisory bodies in the Commonwealth. And that is, as far as the state is concerned, there is no other body like us. Maybe Barnstable has one, I'm not sure. And what we found out from the state is there is funding to assist groups like us in understanding what impacts are on a town. As we'll hear from Constance, these are complex. We have a conservation commission, we have a planning board, but we have shellfish. But to grasp all of the impacts, economic, environmental, etc., of something this big is a tall order. And so what we got out of the state, and a number of you were here last month, is there is funding to hire technical expertise accountable to the town to help us do that. And I wonder, Mr. Chair, whether it makes sense, even if these things are put on hold for years, to get started on that now, and whether it would be, whether you would want a motion or something to empower you to work with the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, to apply, or to work with some of the folks who were here last month to see if we could get some funding now, even though these projects may be put on hold, to have people start to think about, because we're right now the only group in the Commonwealth. That might not be the case 6 months from now or a year from now, but right now we're the only group. So that's a kind of competitive advantage in terms of going to the state saying, could we get some funding to start thinking about if these things ever get off the ground.
I think you jumped ahead on the agenda.
All right, sorry.
No, we have a discussion point on intervenor status as well for this committee and others.
I didn't know what you meant by intervenor status, if that means intervenor.
To be officially within that process. So if we could start that maybe, but I agree with you. I think it's pertinent for us to look at our options, to look at concerns with the project and having expertise. Because I think the biggest thing that came out of our presentation from the state, and Mr. Bullard and others on the committee, having impartial data. The biggest concern from everyone on this table is if this is a landing in Westport, again, if it were to happen, what would that impact be if you cross the Westport River? Everyone around here has concerns with electromagnetic issues and impacts on the tourism, the fishing, both commercial and recreational here in Westport, as well as the impacts to residents. So those are the issues that we want to try to address, to look at. In my opinion, I'm not entirely sure there's another project that would cross a river that's only a couple 100 feet wide and probably only be buried, 10 feet deep, and what that impact would be on Westport and on the north branch of the river, or basically 80% of the river after that. So, sorry, Constance.
I'm sorry. I think that we're jumping the gun on this, and I think that I would prefer if we could think about this and perhaps talk about it another couple meetings when we find out more. One thing that we will find is when you're dealing with the state, the experts that they will recommend or will be their experts. And I think it's very important that other experts are also made available to us as a committee, and that we're very careful about how we seek out expert opinion and what if we were to get a grant, how to use it. And I think I think we need to step back from it and really think about that before we just say, okay, let's start applying to the state for a grant for something via the planning board and Concom. So I'd like just for us to kind of step back from that. I hear what you're saying, but yeah, let's just not jump the gun on it quite yet.
And
That's my opinion.
Constance, just from a conservation standpoint, we usually do independent engineers. We have had projects that's come before conservation where we use our wetlands fund to fund engineers that outside of the town, and then obviously outside of the interests of our conservation, to provide, hopefully, independent and impartial data. So I would imagine that everyone on the committee would want something that would be impartial with respect to that. So, but it's hopefully what would end up happening. So that's the quick high-level update. Does anyone else on the committee have anything to address prior to the presentation?
I'm looking forward to the presentation.
So Constance will be giving us a presentation on the entire scope of what's happening out there. I mean, we're talking specifically about Vineyard Offshore or Vineyard Wind 2, which would be having a Westport impact. But again, as I mentioned earlier on, as you go down to Horse Neck in the harbor and look out, you see numerous turbines popping up, and what exactly those projects are, the extent of them, the scope of them. I think you're going to see, it'll be a little bit jarring or surprising when you see the scope or the extent of the projects that are planned in the future out there. Just a kind of a point of order, I would like to open it up to questions or comments from the public. Obviously, you guys came here, but obviously, let's keep it focused on Westport specific. Specifically, if there are questions within Constance's presentation, that's what I'd like to look at. I also like to limit any comments probably to within a 2-minute time frame. I don't think everyone wants to be standing in the back of the room for 2 or 3 more hours. We can discuss the merits of what Constance provides. I think this is probably not the arena right now to discuss the merits of offshore wind as a whole. We are here as a Westport-specific one, and I just don't want it to delve into anything, kind of outside of that. So, Constance, if you're ready, you can take it away.
I'm ready. I know I look like can everybody hear me okay?
You might want to bring the microphone a little bit closer, maybe between the computers if you can.
I know I look like I have some technical prowess here, but I have none. So,
And sorry, Constance, and to anyone on the members of the committee, as Constance moves forward through her presentation, it may be easier if you see something on a slide and have a particular question to maybe address it at that time, as opposed to waiting to the end and having to go back through slides. I mean, this is more informational, and I think this sets up perfectly for you to get an understanding what Constance knows from a grand scale, so that when Vineyard Wind comes in next month, we have a little bit more of an understanding. There's a lot of miscommunication as to what's happening, what's going on. Hopefully this clarifies some of it, and then we can come back with kind of better questions next month when the actual representatives show up. So, Constance, back to you. Sorry.
Okay. So I'd like to thank Valerie Bain, who is the program director for Westport Community Television, because I came here a couple days ago with my computer and I found out that the town computers or town stuff doesn't like Macs. So I've now got another kind of computer here. So anyway, thank you, Valerie, for being so good and helping me. So we're this overview, and thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. This overview is going to start out in the ocean and then come to onshore to Westport and then go back out in the ocean and then end up in Westport. So we're going to sort of go back and forth a little bit. Beginning with, let me just see if there we go. Okay, so this is a map. And I should say all of the slides except for 2 were taken off the BOEM website. So this is an overview of all of the areas that are now leased, and this is from Maryland or from Delaware all the way up here to I guess I'm doing this pointing. I guess I should use a pointer here. This is the Massachusetts and Rhode Island lease area. This is Vineyard Wind West. So these are the various wind lease areas down to down to Maryland. Now, down in Virginia and North Carolina, there are other lease areas that aren't shown on this map. There is a huge one down off Virginia Beach with 178 turbines, and that's being put in by Dominion Energy. And then there are 3 projects off North Carolina, one off of Kitty Hawk, which is northern North Carolina, and 2 off of Wilmington. And then up in the Gulf of Maine, 850 acres in the Gulf of Maine had been leased by 4 floating turbine projects, and they want to lease more area in the Gulf of Maine. So right now, a total of over 3 million acres have already been leased off the Atlantic coast, with another million in the pipeline. This is a map of the Massachusetts and Rhode Island block, and it changes a lot in terms of the names of the projects. And again, this purple area right here is the project that we're going to be focused on, which is Vineyard Northeast, and now they're also calling it Vineyard 2, and they also refer to it as OCS, which is Outer Continental Shelf A 0522. So if you're good with numbers, it's probably better to use the numbers, but I'm just going to refer to it as Vineyard Northeast throughout, because that's what they have on their construction and operation plan.
Constance, just a quick question for you. Of the projects that you have shown right there, what are we currently seeing? What is currently being built of those projects that you have mapped out right there?
Thank you. The gray area right here is Vineyard Wind 1. That's what we're seeing off of we can see some of those turbines from our beach. But this is the one, this little one right here is South Fork. And the bigger one is Revolution Wind, and they were the same project, but then this is an Ørsted project, but they divided it up because they were having some issues building on top of Cox's Ledge, which was supposedly an area of particular concern because it is one of the last remaining spawning grounds for North Atlantic or from southern New England cod. And it's a very, very precious area for the fishing industry.
Isn't what we see there off the beach Revolution Wind?
Yes, mostly Revolution Wind, because this is going to be the closest to us. It's only 15 miles away. Although, I think we've been able to see a few of the wind turbines on this edge right here for a while, because we've been seeing turbines before the Revolution Wind project got started.
Constance, is that because of the height of the turbines, 800 feet versus 1,200? Is that?
Yes, well, these are Vineyard Wind, and I'll show you this in a minute, but they're about 850 feet high, and the ones in, and the Revolution Wind ones are about 890 feet high, but I'll show you that in a minute. But I'm just, because we have seen, lights out there, and there's two turbines you can easily see at the end of a Cokesick, I know, and they've been up for a long time. And so the best I can, I think it must be, I think we are seeing some of them all the way out for Vineyard Wind 1. But this area is this is what we'll see the most. And, of course, along here. So, and then this pink area has now been divided up into two projects. It's New England Wind 1 and New England Wind 2. These blue lines, this shows you where they're cabling in, where they're coming in for the various projects. This right here is coming off of South Coast, which is now under construction. South Coast is ultimately it's a big project like the Vineyard Northeast project, and it's ultimately going to be moving about 2,400 megawatts, right? Well, right now they are taking the cabling and they are preparing to put it up the Saconnet. It will come onshore onto Island Park Beach in Portsmouth, and then we'll traverse a little bit of Portsmouth and then cross the Mount Hope Bay and then go up to Braden Point. And then the projects coming off of Vineyard Wind 1, you'll see later, have onshored at Colville's Beach in Barnstable.
Sorry, before we move on, are there any restrictions of further leasing being available closer to shore?
There are no plans right here in this block area coming closer than 15 miles. So I don't think there are any other lease areas that are being considered in our neck of the woods, the Massachusetts and Rhode Island block.
But there's also nothing preventing that from happening.
I don't know. I really can't answer that question. But I know that off of New Jersey, they're taking them as close as 7 miles, 9 miles
Right.
along the New Jersey coast, and they're humongous.
Right, and I guess that's the second point I have is should we be taking a position to prevent further leasing from being available, or any possibility of that?
Well, we can, I think we should always be out front in terms of resisting this, but we can talk about that later. I just want to show you that this is the Vineyard Northeast Construction Operations Plan, and in Volume 1 and Volume 2, and the appendices is where I've gotten everything I'm going to show you except for 2 slides, which I'll point out. Oops. Okay, so again, this is another map which shows you the cabling coming off of the Vineyard Northeast project going onto Horseneck Beach. And I don't know if you can read that. And it says Horseneck Beach landfall site. Oops, I'll never get this right. And then this is a more complex map, and this shows you the Connecticut landing as well, and they've got 3 options for landing in Connecticut, one of them being New London, and there's other, which is an industrialized area, and there's 2 other options. But note that note which of the cable landing, or the cable corridors, they call them onshore electrical cable corridors, is the shortest. And the shortest means the cheapest, and cheapest is preferable to more expensive. I should also note that the Massachusetts and Rhode Island lease area, that block that I showed you, is covers 1,400 square miles of ocean, and is, or 900,000 acres. The Vineyard Northeast turbines will be 1,300 feet high. This is what the Vineyard Northeast layout looks like, and I just want to just explain, help you understand what this means. So these are, this is called the inner array cabling, which connects the individual turbines to a converter substation. So there'll be two substations here, which the export cable will go. Well, when I say will, I'm saying this is their plan to come to Westport. And here's another substation that will take the power to Connecticut. They will need two because it's such a big project. It's like 160 turbines, so it's a huge project. So these are all inner array cabling, and this is all AC current. And because it's so far out in the ocean, it will most likely, it really wouldn't make sense to do any other way. They will need a converter substation out here. So they will have to convert the AC power to DC. And so it will be high voltage direct current that will be coming, that they would like to bring onto Horseneck Beach. And so this is the inner array cabling, AC, these are the substations, and then this is an export cable.
This may sound ignorant, but any of the towers that are out there are not directing their electricity to anywhere right now?
South Fork is generating. South Fork is a small wind project, and it has 12 turbines and a substation. And I believe that would be an AC substation, just a booster substation, not just. They're huge.
Are there any landfall sites, I guess? Because any of the...
That one comes into Point Judith, right, or to Quonset, I believe. And so that one, that's a smaller one, and that is generating power. And of course, the Block Island Wind Farm, which is only 5 jacketed turbines are generating power. But Vineyard Wind 1 is not generating power right now. They had a big setback because you probably heard about the blade that broke off, and so they had a bit of a setback there. And then the Revolution Wind project is not complete, but I think it will be complete by spring, right? I think that's the timeline. So this is the Vineyard. Got two things going here. Let me keep track of this. So this is the Vineyard Northeast cable landing onto Horseneck Beach. This is where they plan to bring it onto Horseneck Beach. And then, as you see here, it would cross the Westport River just west of the Fontaine Bridge. And as Jake was saying earlier, this is very unusual because as you saw with the cable going up to Brayton Point, it goes up the Saconnet, but it doesn't cross the Saconnet. So this would actually sort of sever the harbor and the West Branch from the East Branch. And I think that there's concern there as to, and the cable, this would be done with horizontal directional drilling, which we'll talk about later. That's how they will bring this cable onto the beaches. They do horizontal directional.
I have a quick question. Like, I was here at the last meeting when those guys were here from Boston. Aren't they looking for us to pay for that?
No.
Pay for everything.
No, well, I mean, 50% of all of the work out there is paid for by tax incentives and, investment tax credits and the American public and then 80% of what is done onshore is paid by the American taxpayer.
We're paying for it, just not,
Yeah.
just a different way, not directly.
So this is an area of concern to cross the Westport River with 800 megawatts of high voltage direct current. So they have two. There are two possible cable corridors. Their preferred cable corridor goes up 88. And their alternate goes up Main Road, and we'll follow that up. Now, they have to have an alternate cable corridor, so that's part of the plan. They have to offer an alternate, but it's very unlikely, in my opinion, that they would go up Main Road because there would be so much resistance, and there are so many people that live right on Main Road, where 88 is, of course, a state highway. And, of course, Horseneck Beach is a state-owned beach. So there's only limited areas that Westport itself really has a whole lot of say-so about. And so this is the way that it would, the preferred route continues up 88, and the alternate takes a left on American Legion Highway and then travels up Sanford Road.
Sorry, just a question. You mentioned one of our concerns is the high voltage going across the river. Is this, in Rhode Island, are the cables that go up the Sakonnet also high voltage?
Oh, yes, very. In fact, they've got right now 1,200 megawatts that they're going to be laying. This is 800 megawatts of DC. I think that, yeah, and that will probably be DC too because the South Coast is so far out there.
The concern that has been expressed is that you're creating almost a fence on the Westport River, right? If you're going up the Sakonnet River, right, yeah, if you're going up the Sakonnet River, at least you can go side to side. If you create, again, with very little data to present impacts on wildlife, are you creating a fence so that there can't be natural migration of species up to the north end, or towards the north of the river?
Well, not to mention if there's an issue with water, the water table,
Yeah.
by drilling down there.
But on
Yeah,
the first
we have-
point, are there any learnings from Sakonnet that any high voltage parallel or perpendicular to the river has a negative impact?
Oh, there's a lot of
There's a lot of data on both sides.
There's a lot of concern about it.
In Constance, I wouldn't use voltage, I'd use amps, because the voltage really doesn't have any impact. It's the amps.
Okay, thank you. Megawatts?
No.
No, that's what they call it. They'd say 800 megawatts, 1,200 megawatts.
No, it's the amps.
Okay, yeah, I was an art major, okay? So, I have learned, this is so complex. And the electricity piece of it, the voltage, the amps, the watts is the hardest thing for me to understand. The milligauss's and all of that. So, thank you. But they don't really refer to it as amps. They're always talking in terms of megawatts and volts, so. But thank you. Maybe, could you give me a little tutorial after this? I would really appreciate it. I really would, actually.
So before you move on, a quick question.
Uh-huh.
It cuts across at the point, and it's not going to the east side of the east branch because that's probably more difficult for them due to the fact that it's all private land.
I'm going to get to that because it's quite interesting how they made their choice. Oops, I keep going the wrong direction here. Okay, so then we get up to Route 6, and here is what they call where they list 3 possible POIs, point of intersections. So Bell Rock POI, Pottersville POI, Brayton Point POI. So they've got to plug in, they've got to take this current, this electricity, up to a point of intersection so they can plug it into the national grid. And from what I understand, Brayton Point already has all the megawatts it can take with 2,400 coming in. So it would be I can't imagine they could, it will go to Brayton Point. Pottersville would have to go across the Taunton, and it's a lot longer. It seems to me that it makes the most sense that they would come up to the Bell Rock POI, up Blossom Road, which is already a utility right-of-way. So this seems to me like it would make the most sense in terms of it being how they would plug into the National Grid substation. I don't think I'll ever get that right. Okay. Now, and we will talk in a minute about they will need a substation. They will need to build a substation in Westport or Fall River, and I'll get to that in a minute, to then convert the DC current back to AC, because in order to get it onto the grid, it has to be AC. So this is to your question, JC, about how they made this choice exactly. I mean, you can see from going through this construction operation plan that they have thought about this in a lot of detail. So let's look at the developer's reasoning for selecting the Horseneck Beach landing and cable route. And the construction operation plan is very explicit. This route is most direct, at least to the Bell Rock station. It doesn't require traversing Rhode Island, which if you were to go up the West Branch, it would. So another state isn't involved in the permitting process. It's mostly along state-owned property, avoiding crossing likely contentious areas such as the Mass Audubon's Allen Pond Sanctuary or the oyster farms, aquaculture. But I think it's worth noting here that, and should be noted, that Mass Audubon has publicly sworn complete support of offshore wind, and specifically vineyard wind, at a UMass Dartmouth webinar back in February of 2021. So Mass Audubon is all in for offshore wind. But perhaps the most important reason is that another route, such as bringing cables further east into Buzzards Bay toward New Bedford, which is, of course, heavily industrialized already, would increase the length and cost of connecting this wind project into the grid. And so cost is, of course, very important. So again, here's the cable route and POI, and as you can see, the route that I showed you, that I pointed out, is listed as the first route up Blossom Road into the Bell Rock point of intersection. I don't think I ever get this right. Again, it just makes the most sense physically and logistically that it will go into Bell Rock. And you can see right here the listing that is the first one listed, and then the alternate that would come through up Main Road is the second one, and then all the rest of them.
What prevents them from putting a substation next to the Horseneck Beach parking lot and just convert it there and not have to use the cabling under the water?
Because my understanding is that you want to use, if it's direct current, you want to take that as long as you can in, because it's more efficient. It loses less energy in the transportation of it, the moving of it through the cabling. So they would likely put the substation up as close up in North Westport, or possibly in Fall River, closer to the POI, the Bell Rock POI. So-
just a quick question, like, I kind of feel like they put the cart before the horse by putting all the windmills out there without having a place to let that work. That's very bothersome.
Well, they haven't done that yet. This project has
When they
not,
got the windmills up, I see them.
that's a different project.
Oh, that's a different.
Yes, that's Vineyard Wind 1 and South Fork and Revolution Wind, and they all hook in, they go into other areas.
So they are working.
No, only South Fork is working right now, but they already landed their cables. So, and they're not landing cables in Westport. This is the Vineyard Northeast project we're talking about that has Westport in its sights. So another aspect of all of this is the need for an onshore substation. As the construction operation plan states, there will be one here in Westport, and or possibly Fall River, to, and this is from the COP, increase or decrease the voltage of the power transmitted by the export cables in preparation for interconnection to the electric grid. So what you need to understand there is that the power transmitted onto the grid must be absolutely steady. And wind, and neither wind or solar, are steady. They're both intermittent. So sometimes they're running, sometimes they're not. So that substation will also help. It would help control, decrease, or increase, and that is done generally with diesel or with batteries, right? And also with natural gas.
Oh, yeah, with anything.
With it, yeah. I mean, that relies on fossil fuels to do that, right? And so an onshore substation must be constructed to regulate the electricity flowing from the offshore wind complexes, all of them, onto the grid. Additionally, the Vineyard Northeast project will require the electricity be converted back from DC to AC, which means a larger substation. So I'm not going to get into that further this evening in terms of the substation, but if this proceeds, then that is something that obviously the town will want to look into down the line very closely. Of course, the burning question is, where will that substation be built? And this is what you see in the construction operation plan. It's all redacted. So there are many pages within the construction operation plan where you go to look for further information, and this is what you see.
Is there any explanation for that?
No. Well, it's proprietary, or it's, they haven't, yeah, it's.
Then would they have to put the section in and then just redact, or why not just leave that all out?
No, they can just leave that all out. There's a lot that they can just leave all out. And that's why we probably will talk later about the possibility of Westport applying for intervenor status, which would be very smart, I think, for the town to do, just my opinion, and that if we're granted intervenor status, full intervenor status, that means that we really have a seat at the table, and then we are able to see stuff that the public can't. And so I don't think there's anything to lose by applying for it.
Constance, I'm going to point here. In the copies, there's any mention, probably in the redaction, of very large-scale lithium-ion battery farms that are coincident with your substation.
Not that I saw.
Okay, well, that's a good one to watch.
Yeah.
Because those are another old can of worms.
Yeah, and very flammable.
Did you guys look at any FOIA requests for any of
Any what?
FOIA requests for any of the
Not yet, no.
blacked out, because I know it hasn't been easy.
Yeah. Okay, but let's just be clear that the Westport Onshore Electrical Cable Corridor, the OECC, is front and first in Phase 1. We keep hearing that, oh, no, it's not going to happen here, or we're an alternate plan, or this or that, or, yeah, not going to happen. How many times have we heard that? That's not what the construction operation plan says. So here's now we're back out in the ocean now. So the Block Island wind farm is this size, but it's jacketed. It's not a foundation like that. It's jacketed. This is the size that is being used right now in the Vineyard Wind project, Vineyard Wind 1 project. And the Siemens are the ones that are being used, that have been used and are being used in the South Fork and the Revolution Wind project. Now, the ones that are slated to be used in the Northeast project are bigger than these. These are the biggest turbines now available.
Francis, are these turbines made in China?
We don't know which ones they're going to use yet, but the biggest ones are made in China.
Most of the raw materials for these turbines, at least 70% come from China. That includes glues, plastics, all the minerals that go into the. I'm surprised. Yeah. At least security implications to that. At least 70%.
So let's turn our attention back to the ocean and what is being built off our shore that might have consequences for Westport and our neighboring towns here in South Coast, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. As I said, this is Revolution Wind, this is Vineyard Wind, but the Northeast project will be larger than the largest Mean Yang turbine at 1,300 feet with a 320-meter rotor, which is more than 3 football fields across. Let's look at this. So that's what they mean when they say a 320 meter rotor, across the width of that. So this is a foundation. This is the foundation. This is the tower. This is a nacelle. These, of course, are the blades. And they talk about maximum tip height, which is 1,300 feet. And then also minimum tip clearance. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I'll get to how this area right here, which is the wind sweep area, is equivalent to 18 football fields. So if you can visualize 18 football fields, that's the wind sweep area. This is not from BOEM. This is something that our friends at Green Oceans put together, and this is a this is the Sakonnet Lighthouse, which is 66 feet high, and this is a Revolution Wind turbine, which is going to be about 890 feet high. So again, it says based on these trends in wind turbine generator development, wind turbine generators with rotor diameters of up to 320 meters are expected to be commercially available for the Northeast project. Okay, so just for a few comparisons. So the Revolution Wind turbines are 870 feet tall, which is 80 feet taller than the Hancock Tower in Boston. The South Coast turbines, which they're putting that in, that's going to go up the Sakonnet, will be over 1,000 feet high. Vineyard Northeast will be 1,300 feet high, which is 50 feet taller than the Empire State Building, including its spire and antenna.
Constance, can you clarify that that's the height from sea level up? Or is that the height from the bottom of the?
No, sea level up. This is the first time that offshore wind complexes of this size and density have been constructed anywhere in the world. This has not happened anywhere else in the world, and certainly not as close to shore.
Very attractive.
So the wind sweep area is 20 acres, which is the equivalent of 18 football fields. All right, so here are the dimensions of the monopiles. Piles of 43 feet in diameter are pounded into the seabed and pounded 150 feet into the seabed. The industry refers to this as still in the water. This is the wind turbine foundation dimensions and seafloor disturbance. So scour protection, because they have to, they dump boulders all around each one of the turbines to keep anything from happening to their cabling that's buried and coming off of the turbines, the inner array cabling. And of course, if fishermen were, I doubt if fishermen would ever get that close because it would be really not smart, and I don't even know if insurance companies will insure boats that are fishing within the parameters of the wind complexes. We don't really know yet how that's going to turn out. So they scour protection, which are rocks and boulders, and it's all shipped down from Canada, will be dumped around each wind turbine foundation, 10 feet deep, and over 300 feet across. Seafloor disturbance, temporary and permanent, is about 2.7 acres per turbine. They are allowed to hammer in up to 2 pilings a day. You can read this in here, 2 pilings a day, 2 monopiles a day. The force or energy of a strike is measured in kilojoules, right? Kilojoules. And as you can see, they estimate 6,600 to 8,000 kilojoules per strike, which is around the same release of energy as a semi-tractor trailer, fully loaded at 40 tons, slamming into a wall at 45 miles an hour. Each piling requires thousands of strikes, repeating every 2 to 3 seconds for 4 to 5 hours. Conservatively, at 20 strikes per minute for 4.5 hours, that means 5,400 strikes for every turbine. The speed of water, the speed of sound in water is nearly 5 times faster than in air. And NOAA's acoustic buoys in the Gulf of Maine have pick up the pile driving from Vineyard Wind 1. If you wish to pursue the science on how sound pressure impacts marine mammals, I encourage you to read Pile Driving Noise Survey Technical Report by Robert Rand, that's R-A-N-D, of Rand Acoustics. For humans in air, this is from his technical report, for humans in air, most acoustic energy bounces off the body due to impedance contrast. So at air, if you hear a loud noise, it mostly is reflected off of our bodies. However, for marine mammals whose body acoustic impedance is similar to ocean water, sound pressure transients are expected to penetrate their bodies with little reduction in energy. So this is just looking at the dimensions of the wind turbine generators, and you can just look down here where it just runs through. And I think it's very interesting, the blade chord is the width of the blade at 33 feet.
Mr. Chair, I think we're getting away from the impact on Westport.
No, we're coming back to it.
We're coming back to it, but we're not on it right now.
Well, I would like...
You're talking about wind turbines well away from Westport. You're talking about impact on Wales. You're not talking about the impact
We'll get,
on Westport.
we're coming, well, actually, do you know, I think that this does impact Westport because...
I don't think it does.
It does because we live, we're a coastal community.
All right.
Crowd, I get that.
No,
I would like to hear, I'd like to hear Constance's presentation. Let's hear it.
And as would I, Mr. Chair. I believe we should.
I will be through with this little piece in one more slide, okay, and then I'm coming back, okay? So I do want to point out that the clearance from the blade to the water is about 90 feet. So each turbine blade rotation covers 20 acres from 90 feet to 1,300 feet above the water. And the blade tips rotate at up to 200 miles per hour. This is the migratory pathway of the piping plover, and this will be the end of it, John. With massive blades rotating at 200 miles an hour, question is, what is the safe flying clearance between the water and 90 feet for a bird weighing 1.7 ounces? How far out from the blades in any direction can birds and bats fly without harm? And I would just like to say that yes, we want to know more about the direct effects of offshore wind build out on Westport, and yet I would argue that as people who live by and love the ocean, what happens to those who live in the ocean and migrate through her affects us too.
Excuse me. As I discussed prior, we're not here to talk about the positives or negatives of offshore wind, more of the impact on Westport. So Constance is giving a presentation, so we'll continue onward, but
we are back.
We do not need to be giving applause or anything like that, please.
We are back to what's going on, what's being held in the wind turbine generators. And I think this is very important for us to know, because as we have seen with all, we know that the ocean currents often lead towards Westport. We saw a whole lot of blade debris from that one blade that broke off out in Vineyard Wind 1 that washed up to our beaches. And we've had quite a few dead marine animals, 6 whales, that have washed up on our beaches who were first spotted out by that project. So we know that the currents, what goes on out there, the currents tend to bring in towards Westport. So let's look at the chemicals that are held in each turbine and in the offshore, the offshore booster stations or converter stations and electrical service platforms. So the chemical and lubricant spillages and leaks, or God forbid, the toppling over of one or more turbines in a hurricane, could be brought ashore to our beaches. So this is looking at the wind turbine generators and what they hold, and I'll just go through this. I'd like to point out here that the type of glycol that is used in the wind turbine generators, this is in the nacelle, of almost 8,000 gallons. that this type of glycol used for cooling is ethylene glycol. Ethylene glycol is a colorless, viscous liquid with a sweet taste, also used as an antifreeze in cars. Ethylene glycol is toxic and can be fatal if ingested. There will be almost 8,000 gallons of it in each turbine, expected to be topped up annually and replaced every 5 to 8 years. Hydraulic oils, lubricants. And this is interesting. You'll see SF6. SF6 is sulfur hexafluoride, and it is used as an insulator for electrical equipment. It is a greenhouse gas more than 23,000 times as potent as CO2 over a 100-year period. Even minor releases of SF6 into the atmosphere can contribute to global warming. You will see fire extinguishing chemicals. So these are the electrical service platforms and booster stations. The one that we're talking about will be a transformer station, which is larger. And you see hundreds of thousands of gallons of lubricants and chemicals.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've seen all the different types of chemicals and that you know the current comes into Westport, which impacts Westport, are you summarizing that based on that turbine blade that went down, all of these chemicals basically shifting this way or even other ways?
I'm just saying it's very clear that the currents bring things into our beaches here with all the marine mammals and the blade debris that has washed up, and that if there's failure out there, that it could end up on our beaches. And so that's why this is a concern. Well, I mean, it's a concern, I think, for everybody for many reasons, but particular to Westport.
Had the advisory committee considered at some point testing the waters that the town could pay for?
Currently, actually, the town does test waters on a, I think, biweekly basis. The Board of Health tests both Horseneck, Baker's Beach, Westport Harbor, and Cherry and Webb, I guess, for safe swimming throughout the summertime. So it would show up most likely on a test if there were issues with that.
So we do have baseline testing.
There is testing on during the summertime.
That's good.
I also just want to point out, this is like our third meeting, so we haven't accomplished a whole lot yet because this is meeting number 3.
Sorry.
I know, I'm just anticipating for the future.
Yeah.
About the summer, it's no longer summer now.
Well, again, so just so there's an understanding, we are addressing Vineyard Wind 2 with respect to what it could do to Westport. On a grander scheme of what's happening out there, Westport, nor I don't think anyone in this room, can have an impact as to the windmills that are currently up and the other projects that are going up. What we can impact is obviously Vineyard Wind 2. There will be a lot of turbines out there, but specifically impacting Westport, unless you have a direct line.
Right now.
Excuse me?
Do you know how many are out there in Westport Harbor right now?
Probably about 120, 110, 120. But they haven't all gotten the towers up yet, so we're not seeing all of them. And we won't see all of them because some of them are too far away, which would be the Vineyard Wind 1 project. But I think we're seeing some of the Vineyard Wind 1 project. We'll see most of the whole Revolution Wind project. I'm sorry, what?
Sorry, there was a linkage that was referred to a second ago, but I haven't seen any of the data, nor do I know if we've done the studies. But yes, there's bad stuff in these wind farms, but you mentioned the currents come this way. Do we have proof that the currents come this way, and do we have studies that show the predominance of hurricanes and their patterns to actually make that linkage? to Westport, that if a problem were to happen, that there's a high correlation between
Yeah.
that and the impact on Westport, given the fact that this committee?
I think the data is specific to the storm itself, right? As you know, and everyone here knows, you have a nor'easter, it highly impacts, East Beach, or you have a southeasterly wind, it impacts East Beach. Southwesterly will impact Cherry and Webb, Bakers, and Horseneck. So it all depends on, obviously, the tides, the currents, moon tides, and
Right,
wind.
But there's 100 years of hurricane patterns,
Mm-hmm.
and there's clear ocean patterns. And I think it would behoove us to show a linkage between that location and hurricanes in that spot and the likelihood or not likelihood of those bad things coming this way. I think someone made a connection, and I haven't seen the connection.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that later, okay? Let's just continue on with this because it's getting
I
late.
just think for the
Yeah.
committee, I think to
Well, what I'm
the
saying,
gentleman's point, Susie,
What-
that I think we have to show a linkage to Westport.
Correct, and that's what I continue to stress, is that many of the turbines that are out there are already out there, and there will be more continue to be constructed. We, as a committee, are tasked with what would happen with a Westport landing. Now, mind you, the Westport landing, as Constance pointed out, is 30 miles offshore. So we have many projects that are much closer to Westport that we have no say or impact.
Can I just interrupt you? So as the person who tasked the committee, we did not task the committee with looking at Vineyard Wind 2. We just happened to be talking about that project tonight. The committee is tasked with advising the select board on impacts of offshore wind. So, and not specific to the project. I think you're absolutely correct. The one we have the most power to influence is the one that has not yet happened, right? But as we already saw, we had an impact already from a project. And so one of the reasons, John, I think that this information, I think Constance is doing a very good job of being objective about presenting just facts and not opinion. I appreciate that other people here are applauding and suggesting opinion. But I think it's really important that we have this baseline understanding of what these turbines are, because it's going to inform what we're talking about through the rest of the life of the committee. And so I don't want to get like hyping people up or down, but it's all relevant to the committee.
I would disagree. I think a lot of what Constance has presented tonight is really, really helpful. And I appreciate, because an enormous amount of work has gone into this presentation. And I am appreciative of what she has done tonight. But I think there is opinion in here included with the facts about impacts of wind turbines on mortality on marine mammals.
I just asked the questions.
No, you've implied that wind turbines cause mortality.
Not that wind
of marine
turbines,
mammals, which is
not that wind
backed up.
turbines, but
That is not backed
but
up.
pile driving, actually it is. But let's not get into that right now. That's,
Co-chair, excuse me.
You put it on the table, Constance, and that's your opinion, and it's not backed up by any science.
actually, it is.
No,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Charlotte, did you want to come to the microphone and say something?
No, listen, excuse me. As the chair of this committee, no, please, we're not taking public comment right now.
Okay, well,
And we're
everybody's-
not going to let this degenerate into a shouting match
Yeah.
between committee members.
Right.
We'll allow Constance, again,
Let me
we are
finish.
getting late, but, so if we could speed it up a little bit. and
Well,
then
I would.
Secondly.
And just to your point.
Constance, please, I am the chair. Our co-chair has something to say.
Mr. Chairman, I have to admit, this is incredibly informative. And for anybody in this room, and us included, to make a decision on this, I think we have to listen to all sides of this. And this, thank you, Constance, for this information. My point is to get to your question, sir. The NOAA website has every current possible, every direction under every weather condition, historically and going forward, and they can predict, what certain storms will do. It's public information. It's on the NOAA website.
Right.
You go as simple into one of the Eldridge books. Every person that has a fishing boat knows what an Eldridge book is. It shows historically the currents, very plain information. So your answer, to answer your question, that information is available, and I do agree it's worth a study to take a look-see at it. And it also, not only does it have storms and whatnot, but it also has the daily change of the tides.
Right.
And, in this part of the country, you get 4 changes. So take a look. I would urge everybody that has a concern about that, just go out on the NOAA
Yeah,
website.
and I think I would like to recommend to the committee to actually show a clear linkage between those things and the town of Westport and the impact of offshore wind in this location on Westport.
One of the biggest pieces out there is Gooseberry and how the tides run around Gooseberry, and once they get inside of Gooseberry, how they work in the bight inside of Gooseberry. So that's something that, with my concern about the fish and the shellfish and where this is all going to go at the end of the day, I'll personally take a look-see at that for you, and I'll see what I can find.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I was going to point him to the NOAA web. There's a lot of information.
I'm very familiar with the tides. I just want to make sure the town of Westport, are making the linkage.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That'd be great, and it'd be great if you could help.
I will.
Thank you. My point is that we're seeing a lot already coming up with, when that blade broke, we had a lot of the fiberglass and the shards coming up on our beaches. So that was pretty clear that the currents brought that to our beaches. That's my point.
Just had a follow-up about that. Is that okay?
We're going to continue with Constance's presentation.
Okay, so I just want to point your attention to this, that how do they get all of this, these hundreds of thousands of gallons of lubricants and chemicals out into the ocean? Obviously, they take them out via big vessels, and then they have to transfer them either by pumping them out of the vessels or by cans and containers that are hoisted to the platform. So, I do have a question is, spillage? Sorry, I got a little, thank you. Trying to get my notes here. I think this is particularly interesting because if you note the large volume of SF6 on the booster stations and the electrical service platforms, there's a lot of it. Again, a lot of air conditioning or whatever, coolants. And then I want to talk just for a minute about the anti-bifouling additives. That is to prevent anything growing in the substations out there, so that they don't get clogged up, right? So you don't want any algae, you don't want anything growing out there. And what they do is sodium hypochlorite is bleach. So the HVDC, the high voltage direct current offshore substations, intake almost 9 million gallons of seawater a day, and in these open loop systems pump it back into the ocean, warmed it to 90 degrees, and infused with bleach. When they intake, suck in the seawater, they suck in or entrain all marine life small enough to go through the grills of that massive machine, such as massive amounts of phytoplankton, zooplankton, copepods, which are the food of baleen whales, such as the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale, and all fish and crustacean larvae. Marine animals too large to be entrained, sucked in, are killed by impingement, so they're trapped against the screening. All right, so now we're back onto the shores of Westport. And these are this is the required permits and approval for Vineyard Northeast. And these are some of the areas that we might have some jurisdiction over or say-so over, and I'm sure that at some point Jake can speak to this. So there's waterways and water quality. And there's Article 97. And Article 97 is real important because Horseneck Beach is protected supposedly under Article 97. And that is a state law that protects public wild spaces, public state places. And in order to do anything on an Article 97 property or to traverse it with cabling or anything like that, you have to have 2/3 of the legislature say, okay, we're gonna back off of Article 97, we're gonna allow this to happen. Well, right now they're in the process of streamlining Article 97 so that perhaps it'll be a simple majority, and that it might be easier for them to get green energy projects, siting projects through Article 97 approval. And this is also important out in the Cape. We've got another project that's trying to come on to Dows's Beach out in Barnstable, and they are also Article 97. So those of us that are concerned about bringing cabling onto rural recreational beaches very much, are concerned with what's going to be happening with Article 97, and we're paying attention to it. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at this. I just wanted to note that that extra high voltage cabling will be going through wellhead and surface water protection areas. And I'm sure Jake knows all about Zone 1 and Zone 2. So Zone 1 means the protective radius required around a public water supply or well filled. So all the way up 88, they will have to get approval to go through these areas. So 800 megawatts with 2 cable bundles, each containing either 2 525 kilovolt cables or 3 320 kV cables. That's what the cabling has in it. 1 kV, 1 kilovolt, is equal to 1,000 volts. Thus, a 525 kV cable carries 525,000 volts. The cables are laid anywhere from 6 to 8 feet underground. The excavated area for cable trenching and splice vaults will be up to 43 feet wide and 20 feet deep. And so, there's a question about when that goes up through the center of Westport and along 88, if that happens, how much clear cutting will be involved in that for heavy machinery to work within that area. Again, these are things that should be considered and that will have to be considered as well. This is the cable corridor coming on to Horseneck Beach. And these are the rare species habitats proximal, close to the onshore facilities. These are some of the wetlands that are outlined, and you can see that the cable corridor crosses Kirby Brook, Snell Brook, I think 4 or 5 freshwater brooks. Oops. This is the Massachusetts Rare Species Habitat. And these are vernal pools. So this is all, this is these are all concerns that we as Westporters have about what will happen when you bring 800 megawatts of cabling through this area. So, we're almost finished now. As Jake had mentioned earlier, there has been a setback in that, that Connecticut declined to purchase 400 of the 1,200 megawatts of this particular project. And so they are going to probably be renegotiating that. They'll have to do a rebidding process. But you can go on the BOM website and see where we are in the process. Now, this is over with. The public scoping process is over with. We're now into the draft environmental impact statement. That we're here. And you can see the timeline here. And this is what the dashboard, the permitting dashboard looks like. And I encourage all of you to check this out. I mean, it's pretty fascinating. There's a lot of information in here. Again, just to say this one more time, we are front and center. We are the first ones mentioned for the cable landing. And here's what the permitting timetable looks like. I'm going to put it like this. So these are the various permits they need for endangered species consultation, for environmental impact statement, for clean water, for marine mammal protection. And as you can see, this is where we're at pretty much. And I keep checking this about every week or two. And I just checked it 2 days ago. I haven't checked it today. And as you can see, this is all in progress. So even though there's been this glitch in terms of who's going to buy the megawattage, these permitting processes are already in progress. This is, like all offshore wind projects, has been accepted under FAST 41, which is a way of streamlining the permitting process at the federal level. So right now, they have that the issuance of the record of decision will happen in March of 2026. Again, the target date for the draft environmental impact statement was originally May 5th, 2025, and it remains so. BOEM's decision to approve, and it has never, ever not approved an offshore wind project to date, remains the same as it has been, which is the March 2026 date. And the day it is approved is the day that they begin. And the first piece of the project is the onshore cable laying. That's the first thing that they do. So if we don't see a delay of several months because of what happened with Connecticut, that is 14 months from now. And I'll end with this. This is Coble's Beach. This is Vineyard Wind 1 project that brought in, by horizontal directional drilling, 800 megawatts into the Coble Beach parking lot here. And this is the work site. So this is a huge project, and we should be aware of that. This is what the one in Barnstable looked like that was put in 2 years ago.
Do you have that with the password?
It's big. I've been there, but I don't have it. Yeah. So, and that there are so many aspects to this, and it is incredibly complex. And there are many things that we will need to look at further and explore more in more detail, more aspects of it. But I figure that's the most I could expect anyone to sit through in one evening, and I really appreciate your patience.
Constance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Constance, thank you. On that timeline you laid out, the Vineyard Wind 2 project has not received any federal approval yet, correct?
No,
Okay.
no, it's going through the process. We're about halfway through it.
Halfway through the process, okay. Because that, I think, is, of basically a point to point out here in Westport is that based upon the new administration, there has been discussions that anything that has not received federal approval may see a delay in an analysis on impacts. I just pulled that from a news article today that Vineyard Wind 2 does not have their full federal approval. Now, projects that are ongoing or out in the ocean that have already been approved, obviously, we don't know what could happen, but most likely would move forward. So, Constance, appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
I would like to open it up just to anyone here. I think Shauna might had something to touch upon, and then if there are any general questions. Again, I thank everyone here. We have a little bit more to do on our agenda, but I hope that you were able to take this knowledge, do some analysis, do some studying, and be ready when Vineyard Offshore comes in February, which, as of right now, I think we're going to set the date for February 20th. But let's see if anyone has any questions first at the table, and then I will address the public or the crowd.
Yeah, I didn't have anything. I just want to make sure you were going to go to the committee before you went to the audience. But thank you, Constance. I really appreciate the information.
Anything from the table?
Yeah.
Mr. Bullitt?
I want to confess my bias. I guess it is different than Constance, and I want to repeat that I appreciate the work, Constance, you put into this. I think a lot of what you have laid out is very helpful to the people of Westport, the people in the room who've taken time out to attend, the people who may be watching this on TV. I think it's very helpful to get a kind of foundation of the one project that may stand as an example of a lot of projects and the complexity of this and the potential impacts. I am appreciative of that. I think that I believe that your presentation, though, is colored by an opinion going in opposition to offshore wind. And I think you're honest about that. And I think that my feeling is that we have impacts from climate change that require us to move off of fossil fuels very quickly. And those impacts can be seen every day. You mentioned the fuels, oils, and others in a nacelle in one turbine. Deepwater Horizon spilled 210 million gallons of fossil fuels in the Gulf of Mexico, killing all kinds of marine mammals, birds, fish, jobs. And that's the legacy, among others, of our dependency on fossil fuels.
Excuse me. Listen.
No, I'm not
Excuse-
on topic because
Excuse me. Hold on.
that,
Hold on. We are tasked to have a rational discussion.
that
Const-
impacts Westport too. That is,
Mr. Bullard,
yeah.
1 second. Constance is a member of the public. She is an at-large member of this committee from the public, and she represents, obviously, the public and the residents that are here. She has had her time. We'll let Mr. Bullard speak. And again, we are here to have open discussions and not to have arguments on the efficacy of offshore wind. We want to present the data, and that's what we're here to do. And we allowed Constance, we'll allow Mr. Bullard to speak, and we're not going to, denigrate what he has to say.
And it would be nice to hear from the public, too.
We don't have a status quo situation. We have a changing situation. The ocean's changing, lobsters are moving offshore and north, and this is a lobster port. It has been for many years, but you don't find many lobsters now. They're going east, they're going north. And so we have to look at a changing environment that impacts us. And so we have to look at things like wind turbines, not as a status quo environment, but as an environment that is changing. And the decisions we make have to be in the knowledge of that. When I worked at NOAA looking at protecting living marine resources, the biggest loss we had was 12 whales in the Gulf of St. Lawrence that were driven there by warming waters as they searched for food, and Canada didn't have regulations. And I was the lead negotiator to get Canada put in those regulations, and the loss went from 12 to 0. So I do know, I'm not a scientist, but I do know about the loss of whales and what causes them, which are entanglements and ship strikes. And when you divert people's attention from those very difficult causes, it harms our ability to solve ship strikes and that. I do think that, as I said at the outset of the meeting, taking the example of Vineyard Northeast, which is on hold now, but as Constance laid out in what I think was a really good presentation, how that might develop in Westport, how it might come ashore, what road it, the route under the river, the road up under the river, up Route 88 or Main Road, the substation, where it might be located, DC and AC, all the things that Constance went through, all of the impacts that might happen in Westport. I really do believe, and this is a disagreement we had, that it behooves us to get resources from the state to hire independent scientific, engineering, economic consultants. I don't know whether that's in one firm that has all that capacity or more than one firm that advises us now using that example, because if it isn't Vineyard Northeast that does it, it's going to be somebody that does it. And using, as we heard over the last hour, the example of Vineyard Northeast and the detail that Constance laid out, here's how they do it, here's what would happen. Even if it isn't Vineyard Northeast, it might be something like that. So let's get some people with more expertise than we have in this committee, than we have in this room, and say, so, what does this mean? What happens if you run DC under the river in a cable with directional drilling? With people who really know what they're talking about, and use the state's money to hire them, do the work. What's the science? This isn't the first cable that's ever been done in the world. What do we know about cables that go under rivers, that go across bays? Let's survey what's happened. And how does it impact fish? How does it impact shellfish? What do we know about this stuff? We've got some time now, because I don't think anyone's going to do this project for a while, so let's use that time. Constance says, I don't want to do it now. I want to do it now. We've got some time. No one's going to do this project for a while. Let's get these studies done so we know about it and we're prepared. So when some developer comes in and says, hey, I want to do this project, maybe that's 2 years from now, we will have had the benefit of some engineering, some fish biologists, and whatever else we need to know, so So that's the reason I made that at the outset of the meeting. Use this time to our advantage.
I would just like, go ahead.
Rick Smith.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, through the chair, Constance, thank you for the education tonight. You know, from my perspective, information is power. We all have a different perspective on how this works and how it's going to work, and we have no idea where it's going to end up. So what I would like to do to, 10 after 7 now, we've been here since 5:30. First of all, I'd like to ask the chair if he's going to entertain questions from the people who are in attendance here, and if that's not going to happen, we move on to the intervenor status item.
Yep, I would like to entertain questions, and before a question comes up, I would like to just echo the sentiments of Mr. Bullard and Constance, because the concern of this committee, and as I've been able to do some research, even if Vineyard Wind 2 does not land in Westport, but they move forward with that permitting and licensing process, as Mr. Bullard pointed out and as Constance knows, it's my understanding that they could still sell that licensing and permitting off to another developer to then use Westport. So we want to be here, and and I think Mr. Bullard's comment, we maybe look at that in another couple months' agenda after we have Vineyard Offshore in here. But I do think that the concern is that even if that project does put on hold, there are landings that are happening in other parts of Massachusetts that are either getting pushed back, and then they could use Westport. So I think that's what this committee is also tasked with, to make sure that we have the best interests of Westport in our minds.
Mr. Chair, I would like to mention something. First of all, through you, I would like to thank Constance again for her work and her presentation here. I think there is something that needs to be said here. You've mentioned, and Mr. Bullard has mentioned numerous times, we're talking about the potential of the Vineyard 2 project, the potential of the cable landing at Horseneck Beach. However, at our very first meeting, we made changes to the charter, or at least requested that the select board make changes to the charter for this committee. And the changes that I presented that we made were to make sure that this committee is tasked with not just a hypothetical landing, but indeed to help advise the select board with all aspects of any offshore wind project that has any impact on Westport. All you have to do is go down to East Beach and look across the sea to see that there is already an impact, including a visual one. So I think it's important. I think the information here that was presented, it is somewhat important to talk about the merits of the entirety of the industry, because the impacts are already being seen. So I just want to keep that in mind going forward, that we're not just talking about a hypothetical, we are talking about what we can see with our own eyes right now.
Thank you.
And I would just like to correct you in that I didn't say don't want to do it now. I just didn't think that it was something we wanted to vote on tonight to go forward. It seems to me like we need to talk about this on down the line, in a next meeting after Vineyard Wind comes in, and really think about what we're doing. But it seemed to me like you're ready to put it to a vote, and I just wanted to say slow down. And I also just want to say, there are a lot of different opinions out there, a lot of different scientists that would disagree with you mightily about your characterization of climate change and what has to be done right now, and the impacts or efficacy of offshore wind in addressing anything related to climate change. So, I mean, you say it as if it's just like it's decided science. It is not, and there are a lot of questions around global warming and around climate change and how to best address fossil, carbon emissions. And it's really important, I think, to point out that all of these companies, all of these offshore wind companies, they're owned by oil and gas companies. So and I would just like to say one thing, because you always keep mentioning when you were at NOAA and these 17 whales. In 2017, a total of 17 North Atlantic right whales died. Neither line entanglements nor vessel strikes could explain the increase. NOAA put together a task force of scientists in an attempt to understand what might have caused the unexplained deaths. Often, when a sudden spate of unusual whale deaths occur, the Navy is blamed. But in this case, even the Navy appeared clean. According to the Federal Register, they had not deployed any sonar or detonated any explosives off the northeast coast during the weeks preceding the deaths. However, unbeknownst to many, in 2017, Deepwater Wind, now Ørsted, secured permission to disturb and harass marine mammals, including 105 critically endangered North Atlantic right whales. Within the lease area, 0486, with seismic surveys. Ørsted would begin the geophysical seismic surveys in June of 2017. These would take 168 days. The geotechnical surveys would also start in June of 2017 and would require 75 days. They would save money by running their equipment 24 hours a day. It is unclear whether they planned on performing both types of surveys simultaneously or in tandem, but clearly the round-the-clock survey activity in their foraging grounds, the whales in the area would find no relief. And I have...
Constance, listen.
So I'm just saying...
In the middle of that, don't give me any of that stuff. You don't know what you're talking about. Nobody claimed that
yes.
on that. Nobody. I was there, Constance.
I didn't...
Don't give me that. This is...
Mr. Chair.
Yes, I'm sorry.
This is ridiculous.
So I appreciate the passion of the committee members here. I just want to say, kind of going back before we got a little loud, I just want to say that I also think it's premature right now to engage the state and the money, but I do think we need to look at that. But I agree with what Constance said. I want to make sure I'm forming opinions correctly. So I'm thinking like the March or April meeting would be the time where we would put together what is it that what do we need to do to request money from the state, and what do we want to ask them? What are the questions we want to ask? Because I think we need to put that together before we can just like go vote on getting money, right?
And Mr. Chair, one final point on that. I think it's very important that when we do consider those requests, we get clear answers from the state what kind of strings are attached to any of that funding.
Yeah. And as I mentioned beginning, the legislation that Governor Healy signed still has a 15-month window for public comment. So that fund will not be available until 15 months after it was signed, which was in November. So it would probably be in the beginning of the 2026 if the Commonwealth moves. Okay. If there are a couple of questions, let's please keep them short, and so we can move on to other business. Sir? Just come up to the microphone, please. State your name and your address.
Mr. Chair, in the interest of time and with appreciation for everyone who has come tonight, may I ask that we limit comment at this time to Westport residents?
Yes.
Thank you.
Your address and your name?
Brian Pontalillo, Drift Road.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation and the work that went into it, Constance. Awesome. Just one question. When the folks from Vineyard Wind are here next month, will the committee ask them what's behind the redacted section?
We absolutely will. Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair.
I mean, I'd love to see them dance up here.
Yes, and they may be able to present something that we don't already know, right? I mean, that's why we're bringing them here, and that's why I specifically told them we want Westport-specific details on this project. That's what I'm looking for, at least, or as a committee. Any other questions from the crowd?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Ted Kamenek, River Road.
Yes, sir.
One point of clarification and then a process question. The clarification, it seems like there's a lack of clarity on the scope of the committee. I think at one point it was limited to the Vineyard Northeast, and at another point, I think you two mentioned a broader scope. I think it would be helpful to understand what that scope is. It does feel like a broader scope is in our best interest. Second point of just process. Great discussion today. Thank you for the presentation and the comments. I applaud Westport for taking the opportunity to get input. What I did not hear today is a beginning of the building of the argument in our case on the impact to Westport. I'd like to understand the rough timeline and the process for building out a holistic case on our behalf? Is that something that is over the next few weeks or something in the March, April, May timeframe?
No, this would probably be over more within months, looking at it, because again, we are only at the beginning. This is only our third meeting. The first one we had the state in, Vineyard Wind, Vineyard Offshore would have tried to make this meeting, could not, scheduling conflict, and will be in February. So once we get an understanding of that, I think we move forward and, you know, we have stuff like intervenor status. Maybe we look at the consulting fees and various other impacts. Because again, we are dealing with a lot of variables, right? If, you know, prior to Christmas, we figured this Vineyard Wind 2 was a done deal and the 1,200 megawatts were accounted for. Governor Lamont said, no, I don't want the 400. So then slightly back to the drawing board. So we have been tasked to, as Shauna has mentioned, to basically advise the select board if something comes forward and comes before the town. So we are more in a data collection and data gathering phase, and then we would move forward and, you know, obviously, if something comes before us, there would be a vote from the entire committee, no different than anywhere else, with the accepting it or obviously rejecting if a project came before us.
Great. Last question. You mentioned a few possible objections, like the concern of the cables going across the river. I'm just curious, is there a point in the process that you'll solicit participation to help build out those arguments for you? Is that?
Yeah, so Vineyard Wind Offshore would have to obviously come before the town, present something to the town. They would also have to come before Conservation Commission. As a member of Conservation Commission, I know what is northbound on that 88 side. I mean, you, as Constance has pointed out, there are some very integral parts of the Westport River watershed that comes through there. Kirby Brook, Snell Brook, numerous wetlands. So obviously the impacts of what a tunneling, trenching, big dig, if you will, would have as an impact on those. So this will be an open process for everyone in front of conservation, in front of, within the permitting process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Co-chair.
Through the chair, sir, just for clarification, and everybody in the room, our scope is in our mission, which is a public document, and if you look at Section 3 of the scope, which identifies the scope, everything we talked about and how we got there tonight falls within. The good, the bad, and the ugly, but it's all here, and we were within those parameters tonight, so it's important that if you really have an interest, this can be found. It's a public document, and it certainly lays out our scope and what our mission is and what our charge is by the board.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have one.
Oh, yes, sir. Just
Be brief.
state your name and your address. Thank you, sir.
That's John Cummings, River Road.
Yes, sir.
I just want to thank both of the sides of the opinion and the very middle, which is where the activity actually happens. I appreciate that, you know, both Constance and Mr. Bullard have an opinion. I appreciate the fact that Constance did all this work. She did a great job. But she made it very clear that it was opinion when she said it was opinion. So I think that's great. I think we all have to realize that it's not settled science. There's a lot of data out here. We got to figure out what makes sense, what actually impacts Westport, like you said, and then let the chips fall where they may. But we got to be united in that. We can't be an arguing, you know, debating organization. We have to work together to figure out what's the real impact, how can we affect the result to the benefit of the Westport residents and the environment as well. Okay?
Appreciate it. Thank you.
What committees have you seen in town that don't like argue?
I'm new to this.
Conservation, we're great. It's a kumbaya session of conservation. Do we have a question? One more question, please.
Janice Dye, Main Road. Since Vineyard Wind is going to be here next time, can we make a request for a bigger venue?
I think we should.
Yeah, we will do something with that. And again, everyone that showed up today, I would appreciate it if everyone showed up in February. This is a very, very obviously important topic, and we want that. We want the answers. So that's what they're coming in, hopefully, in February for. Any other questions from the crowd? Do you want to? Can I just request just to move one of the agenda items to discuss the next meeting agenda and the date so that people here can head out?
Yeah.
So first off, we have to set the date for the next meeting, which would have Vineyard Offshore coming on. I spoke with them earlier today, and they discussed February 20th, Thursday, February 20th as a date. I don't know if it works for everyone's calendar here.
That's fine.
Climate resilience is that, but we'll move it because
Okay.
I'm sure if that's the only time they can come, that's probably.
That's what he preferred, as February the 20th.
So we'll try and reschedule climate resilience.
I didn't have that on my calendar. I guess I should put it on my calendar.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so just for everyone in attendance, February 20th at 5:30, which is Thursday again. The location will to be determined. We'll figure out if there's obviously a better or bigger location for everyone to come in. And again, I would ask at that meeting, again, there are a differing of opinions, but they are nice enough to come down here and hopefully provide us some information. So I hope it does not turn into an attack session on Vineyard Offshore or Vineyard Wind. So, but they are, as of right now, showing up. So we will set them on the agenda for February 20th. So we just have some small business to attend to. If you guys want to head out, that makes it easier for you guys. So thank you.
Thank you.
Don't congregate in the hallway and talk because it's disruptive. So if you're going to talk, keep going.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, that's okay.
So the next agenda item we have, and I don't know if Mr. Thrasher would like to address it, is the intervenor status, or do you think that's on a little bit of a larger scale to discuss?
It's certainly, it's a larger scale if we're talking about specifically the Vineyard 2 project. It's still a long way off. I think there are, Constance might actually, do you have?
Yeah, but you said that the deadline was in February, right?
So that was for, I believe that's for the Revolution. There's another.
So,
Yeah,
so you-
that was a separate thing.
So Christopher, does that mean that for each project, you obviously have to apply for intervenor status? You can, it's not a blanket
Well,
one for,
So it would be each project.
Okay.
I do think that in terms of, for the towns, as the town of Westport, there's, I think it should be limited to the
one where we're named.
the one, anything, yeah, any
Okay.
project where we're named. And I also think that would be, frankly, I think we should have an extensive discussion as to
Okay.
the potential of that.
I don't think we'll have standing, you have to have standing. So it would be hard for us to, I think, be granted that in other projects, but certainly
Okay.
we would be.
So maybe we put that off to maybe after Vineyard Wind comes in February, we can do it maybe in the
Do we have
March. Do we have time for that?
Did you
think?
get?
So if we're talking about the Vineyard 2, there is time for that. So I apologize, because I actually thought you were talking about a different project, so.
So you're sure?
I'll double check again, but I'm.
Okay.
almost- I'm
If you wanna-
99.9% sure we don't have to. move
If
on
you
that.
learn, so there's a select board meeting on the 27th. So if you learn that there's a time critical component, maybe the select board could take it up.
Okay.
So just let us know.
Okay, thank you. Last thing on the agenda is approval of minutes from November and December. I thank Mr. Thrasher for sending those around. There were some edits that were made, and I think if we'll first look at, I guess, November. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes?
So
So
moved.
move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you for doing those.
Yeah, they're really nice.
Great job.
Nice job.
I know this isn't necessarily a popular opinion, but I do believe that the Massachusetts open meeting law gives a lot more requirements of meeting minutes than Roberts, so I try to be as thorough as possible on
Well,
this.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Last one, I guess, December meeting, we'll do that as well. The December minutes, does anyone have any issues with that one?
I'll move the minutes of December.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Well, that is it for our fun-filled agenda this evening.
Before we adjourn, I want to apologize to Constance for raising my voice. I should not have done that.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate, there are differing opinions on this, and, we just want to try to keep it as cordial and civil as we can here, and, get the most information and data that we can for the town of Westport. So that's what we're tasked with. So I appreciate that, Mr. Bullard. I appreciate everyone for coming this evening, and.
If he is Mr. Bullard, then I should be Dr. Gee.
Well,
If he's John, I'll be Constance. How about that?
To the chair's point, I think from my perspective, this is a learning process for all of us, and including our government officials, up and down the ladder, however you want to look at it. So, it's a good exchange. That's fine. We move on. But we're here to learn, and we're here to take that education and share it with the board and those who we report to. So it's all good.
This is a very intense and emotional issue. I mean, what they're doing out there it's incredible, and it's hard to get your head around. And so, there are people that think that that's what has to be done, and it has to be done now, and there are others, myself included, who do not want to see this happen.
And
so it's, so there will be, it will be impossible for us to have this committee and everybody sit there and get along all the time, because it's just not, that's not going to happen.
And you're an at-large member of the public. You are representing the residents of the town of Westport, and there seems to be a little bit of
Try
pushback.
to be, we try not to physical. I try not to go over there and biff you, John, but
I will say this on the record, I could not possibly be more opposed to the advancement of the offshore wind industry, but I am determined to approach the business of this committee as objectively as possible. But I really do appreciate the opinions, all the opinions that have been given around this table and continue.
Well, everyone has preconceived biases, including the Supreme Court, so I don't think we can change that, so.
And I'll tell you one of the concerns that I have personally about rushing through hiring government experts or experts to come in to advise us on this and tell us what they've found on this is that in my experience, and I've been at this for only 4 years, but deep, there's a lot of research that counters what NOAA comes out with and BOEM states, but it's good research, but it never gets out there. And, and so I don't necessarily trust who the state, and again, what the strings attached would be for are we completely able to hire who we want, and can we bring in an acoustics expert like Robert Rand? Can we, is that some of the things that we can do?
I think as a committee, we can put it up to a vote and move forward with, whichever experts we feel.
And I have a question also, about. No, I don't want to cherry.
We just had a nice little.
Didn't we just have a little kumbaya?
No. I want to be able. I want there to be.
You don't think there's climate change? I mean, that's what.
I didn't say. I didn't. I did not
We're
say
still
that.
trying to get. We're still trying to get out of here at a reasonable
I did
hour.
not say that. I said that I did not agree with you in your characterization of how immediately it had to be dealt with, or the extent. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in climate change. And, and you always go there with me.
Okay,
And
no.
Los Angeles is on fire.
that has nothing to do with
Would a
climate
motion
change.
to adjourn be
Yeah,
appropriate?
can I get a motion to
I
adjourn?
move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are
And
adjourned.
here's